Well, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're at. And today we wanted to talk about using some new functionality that's going to be released for Stratum coming up in the next week or so. So you'll see an announcement on 7.0 of Stratum here shortly. Right now, I do have the phones muted, just trying to keep some of the background noise down, but if you want to ask a question, use the chat feature in WebEx, and I will hopefully notice that and respond. I've got it up here in front of me, so hopefully I'll see that. And one of the things and one of the key feature of 7.0 that's coming out is data copy. And the data copy is a feature that we've talked to a number of people over the last couple of years, and found out that one of the things that people do is they want to build a sales plan. I don't think that's news to anybody, but they want to build a sales plan, and often they want that to start, say, with this year's data or last year's data, so they want to copy data to create a sales plan. And what data copy allows a Stratum user to do is copy data from one measure to another. So you might copy from sales over to your sales plan or your budget or your forecast, whatever you might call it, but you might copy that over. Or maybe you've got a plan and now you want to copy that iteration of the plan to a frozen location so that no one can make changes to it. And then you want to keep a working copy of the plan that you can update and manipulate either through imports, et cetera, or through the Stratum planning mechanism that's available. So I'm going to show a little bit of that, but that's the general thought about data copy. Now, for those of you that have been around Stratum for a long time, might remember that there is in the admin functions of Stratum, there is a data copy facility there, and that data copy facility allows you to do exactly what I described, but what it doesn't, there's two things about that we wanted to improve upon. Number one, you have to have admin capability to do that, and you couldn't do it from Stratum Viewer. We wanted everyone to be able to do this right from the web, no matter where you are. You can work on your sales plan, start copying things around, et cetera. Two, the original data copy that's out in the admin functionality does not allow you to move data into Stratum Viewer, so you can't see it in the Viewer environment unless you run another process, which typically includes getting IT involved to run that process, because in a general sense you need to be on the server to be able to run that stuff or have a scheduled job that runs that stuff. And we wanted to eliminate those restrictions. So what we've done is we've added a data copy functionality to the Viewer admin section, obviously with some security around it that I'm going to go through. But that allows a user, while they're in Stratum Viewer, to select what they want to copy and to kick off a copy, and then after a number of minutes, whenever that copy finishes, see that result in Viewer and begin to take advantage of it. And we'll see that here in a few minutes. So the first thing I wanted to do was, as I just described, talk about data copy and describe what it was. The next thing to go through my demonstration was to set up a little bit of a scenario in terms of what we want to accomplish. So let's just say here's my scenario. And as many of you have heard in my demo, it is always September. So let's pretend we're in September of a current year, and I want to begin the process of creating a plan for the following year, for next year. And as we do that, we really, in my company, we work by regions, and we really want to copy our sales data over to a working plan that where we take the West region, and our expectation is, in a general sense, it'll be up by 2%, and in the Eastern region, it's going to be up by 1.5 points. So I want to do those copies, and I want to put it over there. And then ultimately, I also want to take our Dewdrop brand, which is a brand in my demo, and that brand, over and above the increases that I've already talked about for the East and West, it's going to be up across the board, or it could be a decline, whatever, of course. I'm going to show an increase here in the demo. So with that thought in mind, and knowing it's September, what would I need to do to begin to create this plan? And to do that in Stratum, I really am going to have to use sales from the current year And then in my case, I'm going to go ahead and use the forecast that we had for this year, or the plan we had for this year, for the months that we haven't completed our sales for. So that's for basically for, I'll use sales from January through August for this year, because those are closed months. Our sales are complete for those months, and I can copy over and apply an increase to them. The forecast, I've got an adjusted forecast that we've been working on throughout the current year that says what we expect to do in September, October, November, and December, and I'm going to copy that over and to make up the remaining year months that I don't have sales for. So that's really my plan. What that will mean is I'm going to in data copy, I'm going to have to set up what amounts to 2 sets of data copies with 2 copies in each of them, because I'm going to set up a copy where I want to copy January through August for the West region, and then I'm going to set up a copy for January through August for the East region. So in my example, I have 2 regions, as I mentioned earlier. I want to increase each of them by a different percentage, so that means I'll need to have 2 separate data copies for that. And then I'm going to set up a separate data copy to copy the forecast from the for September through December. So I'm going to September through December, which are months that have not occurred yet. I'm in the demo, I'm midway through September, so I don't have my complete sales picture for September. So I'm going to go ahead and use the forecast for September, and obviously I don't have sales for October through December because October through December, because we're in September, and I got to get that stuff. So that means ultimately I'm going to have 4 data copies. Oh, by the way, it's 2017 in my demo as well. But anyways, that's kind of the scenario that we want to look at. So we're going to set up to create a sales plan based on this year's sales, it being September of 2017 in my demo right now, and we're going to create the 2018 plan. So what we're going to look at in total here, just today I want to go through, I've already talked a little bit about data copy. The data copy creation. So I'm going to talk about setup, creation, how you run a data copy, what the end result looks like, and then changes using planning and Excel, and show you how some of that works. Like I said, if you have questions, feel free to flip stuff up in the chat, and I'll try and respond to those as we go, and we'll see where we get to. So the first thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about was the setup for data copy. And I'm just going to go over here into Stratum. So here's my Stratum, and you can see here I'm in 7.0, and so this is the new 7.0. This will be coming out. The upgrade for 7.0, a couple of things. If you just want to get to 7.0 and take advantage of just the general features so that you're on the latest release, that upgrade is very simple and straightforward. If you want to take advantage of the new data copy features, you'll need to not only install and do the regular upgrade, but there are some services that you need to run to start up that are new, that might be something new, and it'd probably be a great idea to contact us if you want to get those data copy services up and running. There are a few things about data copy that you're required to have in place. I'm going to go into help here. And you can see the list. Amazingly enough, I'm going to search on data copy. So I'll just copy, So working with data copy. So here I am. So access to data copy. I'm just going to go down the list here and talk about a couple things so you understand what it takes. So first of all, data copy can be accessed by security and view administrators. Now, an interesting part of that is those 2 levels of users in Stratum can do anything they want and create them. If you want to have your advanced users have access to data copy, you can set up a user link that allows them to have access and run data copies as well. They will not see the link in the admin view group, but they certainly advanced users can go ahead and use data copy, but you'll need to set up a link for them, and that's pretty simple to do. The couple other things here is just kind of data requirements list. So first of all, you have to have 7.0. 2, you have to have your today you'll need to have your Stratum server application running on Windows SQL Server. There's a bunch of things in data copy that are set up to work only in that environment right now. And if you need to do stuff in your servers on IBM I, a couple of things I would suggest. One, there's the data copy I spoke about earlier. You can still use that, the existing data copy that's out there. The other is you might want to consider moving to SQL Server as we get more and more of our customers doing that and really looking for the performance that brings forward in that environment. 2, you have to have a valid license to planning. So if you have a user-based license or you have a planning license, you'll have access to data copy. And you can obviously talk to us about that if you need that, but you'll need a registration for that. And then the last is the services I talked about. So when you do the 7.0 implementation upgrade, you'll need to make sure that you get these services up and running. And if you need help with that, don't hesitate to call us, and we can show you that. And when we get into data copy, I'll actually show you how you can check on that as well. So that's that. And then in terms of the setup that you need to have in place, there's a number of things. I'm actually going to go through most of these. So you do have to have the planning app, as I talked about. You'll have to have, there's some viewer measure settings. So this is a new measure maintenance that I'll show in just a minute that enables a particular measure to be copied to. So, we don't just want to willy-nilly say, hey, anybody can copy anything anywhere. We certainly want to be able to say, do you want to allow, as an administrator of Stratum, do you want to allow people to copy stuff in and over what's in this measure? So I'll show you how you do that. And then also you have to decide who can do a user profile, a data copy. We just don't want the whole world out there just doing data copies. That's probably not in anyone's best interest, but you do. So you need to make sure that person is authorized to do that, and I'll show a little bit of that as well. So those are the things that I'm going to show you what you can do, and then we'll go from there and actually create a data copy and run that thing. So let's go back into Stratum. So that was help. Using the help, there's some good information. That's obviously the 7.0 help. The 7.0 what's new document, everyone should have been notified about that. If you weren't, is that true? Maybe that notification didn't go out yet. So yeah, in the next week or so, you'll see the 7.0 notification, what's new doc, and it has, as always, a really cool little video about what's new, et cetera, plus a nice description of what's going on here. So a couple of things that you need to do when you're in data copy, and most of that's in admin. So to get going here, you'll see in admin really 3 new things that have become available in version 7.0. We have the data copy, we have dimensions, and we have measures. So dimensions, I'm just going to show this real quick. Dimensions, though, don't really impact data copy. This is not something you have to do to set up data copy, but both dimensions and measures, we added functionality here. So if I go into this, this is a list of all my dimensions. You might remember this as member properties previously, but every dimension now you can say whether it's enabled in Stratum, and so why would you have dimensions that aren't enabled in Stratum? The reason you would do that is we found more and more people are using Stratum as a source of information, using the Stratum repository and the value they've created in that repository as a source for other solutions and other ways that they might be getting information. And probably the one that's pushed us to do more and more is both Excel and Power BI from Microsoft. And one of the things that we've allowed you to do here is to include dimensional information, in particular virtual dimensions, which are very easy to add to Stratum, and make them available to other solutions like Power BI, for example. And a good example is right here, this customer parent address. So in general, you wouldn't want that to be something that a viewer user would see in their dimension list. You might want it in the attribute list. This does not take it out of the attribute list. But you might have made, but certainly you don't want to just have a gazillion dimensions display like these addresses. But we added that as a dimension in the cube so that when you reference the cube in other tools, that address is readily available for your use. So just a way for us to better integrate with some other tools that are out there, but at the same time, we wanted to provide you the ability to turn stuff off and on in Stratum. So that's just a little comment about dimensions. As I said, that isn't really relevant to data copy. Now, to get to what's relevant with data copy, I'm going to click on the new measure maintenance, and this has a series of things here. For our scenario today, I'm going to copy data from sales over to what I call my marketing adjustments. This is a plan we're putting together for our marketing team to allow them to have a copy of the plan and make adjustments to it. So if I just search for adjustments, I'll find those measures. And down here you can see them. Here's my marketing adjustments, and I have a number of them here. They're right here. You can see them. And I'll just talk a little bit about each of these. So viewer enabled, this is, will a user see this in the list of measures in viewer? And again, this links back to what I was talking about using Stratum and the Stratum repository and other solutions besides viewer, and allowing people to see stuff. So these are all turned on in viewer. Whether you're allowing people to plan on these measures, you can say yes. And planning allowed, you can say yes. And you can say planning enabled. This is an interesting way, new feature that we added to allow you to say, yeah, normally you can plan on this, but for whatever reason, maybe somewhere in your process, you've said, I don't want people adjusting this measure any longer. And you can come in here and turn off the ability to enable. You can disable it for some period of time. Then you come back in here and turn it on, and it'll be ready to go. Same with over here, you'll see data copy. So in the case of my marketing measures, I actually import data directly into this first marketing adjustment, so I don't want people to copy over it. So I have that. You cannot data copy into that. But these next two, adjustment 2 and adjustment 3, are sandboxes that I use to allow myself to copy data in, allow people to make adjustments, and do things with that data. So those, you'll see I have them both enabled and allowed. So again, allowed lets me copy to it. Enabled says whether or not I'm actually right now going to allow people to do that, so I could turn off data, the ability to copy for short periods of time by turning those on. So that's one of the first things you have to do, is to figure out what measures you're going to copy stuff to. We don't do anything on the from side. You can pick any measure you want to copy from. You cannot copy from the same measure to the same measure, but you can copy from, say, I could copy from marketing adjustments 2 to marketing adjustments 3 if I wanted, for example. And the reason I would do that is maybe I originally copied sales to marketing adjustment 2, and then I want to copy 2 to 3 to create a fixed or frozen copy of that I'm not going to let people adjust, but then I'm going to go back and let people play around with marketing adjustment 2, something like that. So a lot of options, a lot of ways you can go about this. So that's one thing you got to have set up. You got to make sure that those measures are turned on. Now, another thing, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is the old role stuff. Clearly, you're going to have people have ability, have access to these measures. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, you can come in and adjust what measures someone has access to. And you don't, obviously, if I'm going to allow someone to copy into marketing adjustments, they have to have access to marketing adjustments. And you can see here, here's the marketing adjustment measures, and they're here and available. So, anyways, those are things you need. People have to have authority to be able to look at those things. So, let's see. That's roles, and roles. Nothing's changed in roles. None of things what I just mentioned. None of that's new. That's just the ability to go ahead and make sure that people ultimately can see those measures. Now, the other thing you need to do is go into the user profile, and you can pick a profile here, any profile, and you'll see a new box right here. So this person, Christian, doesn't have authority to data copy, and I can say he can copy everything, or he can do partials. And if I say partials, which things can he actually do copies to? And what this is, these are data copies I already have defined. So now I'm locking down this feature down a little bit, and I'm saying, no, I'm going to create data copies, and I'm only going to let this person look at certain categories and certain measures for copying. So you can lock it down. I typically have just been using all for myself. I'm an administrator and I can do anything, but you have to come into each you have to come into each profile and give people authority to be able to do data copies. So not everyone has access to it. So those are some of the setup features that you need to go through. And then the last thing is then you have to set up an actual data copy. So data copies are relatively straightforward. Whoops, sorry. Data copy, yes. So a couple of things about data copies. These are, so just going back to my scenario, remember I wanted to copy this year's sales for January through August into my marketing measure, and then I wanted to copy the forecast for September through December into the remainder of the year. So with that in mind, I've already done a couple of them. You can see these are for the Western region, but a couple of features in here while we're looking at data copies. So you can see I've already run these. You can see who owns it, when it was submitted, when it completed, what's the status, things like that. You also over here have a drop down that allows me to see all data copies that have ever been created. So here's all of them. This list grows pretty fast. Obviously, this is a new feature function, but what I found is as you're messing around, maybe you have a sandbox, you're doing different things with data copies, I tend to grow this list relatively quickly as I try different things. So you can actually archive these things, and that's what this right here does. This allows me to archive what's happened in a data copy. I'm sorry, not what's happened, but it allows me to archive the data copy so it doesn't show up on my regular list. So if I go to archive data copies, I've archived all of those. If I go to my current data copies, which is the ones I'm working with right now, that's what I see. So there you have a data copy. So what I'm going to do actually, what we want to do is we want to copy. One of the data copies we would want to run is to copy the Eastern region sales, because I've already done the Western. And Eastern region sales, and if you remember back in my scenario, I wanted to increase those sales by 1.5% and go ahead and create a copy for that. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and just copy this Western one, but it's pretty much the same whether you do it, whether I copy one of these or I create it by hand. But I wanted to show you also how you can copy one of these. So if I go in and click on I'm copying the Western region sales to Plan 3. This is my marketing measure adjustment 3 this year to next year for January through August. So I'm going to come in and if I just say run that, it actually says, do you want to reprocess that thing so I can reprocess it, or do I want to edit it and save a copy? So I'm going to go ahead and edit that, and that will come up with my data copy. Now, if you just created a new one, you'd get this exact same screen, only everything would be blank. So here I'm going to go ahead and this is going to be my Eastern, right? My Eastern region sales to Plan 3 for this was January to August. So I'm going to do that. Now you have some options here too. You can either replace the data or you can add to the data you already have out there. Now, interestingly enough, I don't have any data out there for the Eastern region in my plan. I've only copied the Western region. So it's not going to matter if I do a replace or an add at this time, because when it says replace, down here when I have a filter, it's only going to replace the data you're filtered on. So, so you have some choices here. I'm just going to go ahead and leave the default right now. If I had copied any Eastern region data over there already and I'm trying to put a new copy of it there, it would blank it out and go ahead and clear that out. Now I need to do the data mapping. So, I'm sorry. A couple things here. You're going to get an email when this thing completes. This probably should say Eastern right here. So you're going to get an email when it completes, and you can put in the subject and the text, whatever you want it to say. So you get notified when this thing completes. And when this completes, the data will have been copied and is now available for you to view in Viewer. The data mapping is next. So I'm going to copy, here I can basically select any category you have in Stratum. In my case, I'm going to select my actual sales, and then I could select any measure that I have within there. So these are all the different measures that I have. In this case, I'm working on units. You could do units, you could do dollars, whatever you want, and you can add to this as well. You could copy more. If I want to do dollars and units, I could do those both at the same time. Just clicking the plus sign here will add an additional data mapping. The other thing is I need to select a target. So in my case, I mentioned marketing adjustment. This is the only one. These are the only two things I have open for copy. Normally, you guys would not have actual sales here. I just noticed that. That's because I was playing around with my demo and just seeing what you could do. Normally, you wouldn't have your actual sales as a target category. But anyways, you'll see I picked my marketing adjustment, which is what we set up when I said we allowed these measures to be copied to back in the measure maintenance that we were looking at earlier. And then I can apply a factor to that. So obviously, if a factor was just 1, I just get a straight up 1-to-1 copy. In this case, as you remember, I actually wanted this to be by 1.5%. So I'm going to do this by 1.015, which would represent a 1.5% increase in the data as it moves from sales over to marketing. So I've added that factor. And then the next thing is time mapping. So time mapping is an interesting question because in my case, I have sales down to the day, and I only have my marketing adjustments by month. So what I have to do is pick common things to copy from. The majority of the time, and the majority of people we've talked to, I'm really going to copy, from one month to the same month in the next year. But you could offset these things if you wanted and get more complicated with this. You do have to copy from one like period to a like period on the other side. So I can't copy from weeks to months or something like that. You can see the detail. So I want to copy my current year's sales. Remember, we talked about I want to go from January to August, so at current year sales. This is for my actual sales. And on the target side, I'm going to copy into next year, January through August. So this is a pretty traditional, straightforward setup. You do have a button here that allows me to see the very specific time mapping. So this tells me very specifically what's going to get copied from where to where, et cetera. So it lets me know that. So that's okay. So anyways, that's the time mapping. This is generally very straightforward to set up. And then the last thing is filters. So what data is I want to copy? And if you remember, I copied my Western region stuff here, but I could add, and I could have multiple filters here. Again, just clicking the plus sign, you'll get rows of filters, and then you'll pick your level, whatever dimension you want to filter on. This is currently filtered on the West, and we wanted to filter this particular copy for the East. So I'm just going to come in here, and amazingly enough, I'm going to click East. Say OK. So I'm good to go with that. So now, remember what I've done is I was working on a new data copy here, copied the other one, so the time was all set up for me, that kind of thing. Now I'm just going to save this, and that'll now be out on my list here. So you can see here's my Eastern copy. You can see it's not been processed, so all that's here. And then all I do is I select this and say, yep, go ahead and copy that thing, or run that thing, and I'll be good to go. It's going to tell me it might run for a little while, and I'm going to say yes. And what that does is in the background now, that's doing the copy and doing all that stuff. I'm going to highlight this other one here while that thing's running, and I got a couple other things I want to show you while that's running. But here's the one that I've already run, the Western region. And there's an option up here. If I click on this, this is actually going to show me the log for what happened on this thing. It actually allows you to see just at a high level what's transpired. Now, for those of you, if there are any issues with what's transpired, there is a whole set of logging available on the server that shows you very specifically all the details of what's happened during the copy. But you can see here, this was created. This was the processing details. Different stages underneath the covers. One of the things I wanted to show here was that this is taking advantage of some of the features we added in some of the 6.x stuff. So, we're building on the changes that we've made over time here. The trickle load processing is one of the things that allows us to get this into the cube. If you guys aren't using trickle loads today, this is a feature where you can actually load data into Stratum multiple times during the day, even, say, for your inventory orders or plans in the background and not disturb your users that are in Stratum today. So you have the or while they're using Stratum right now. So you have that option. There's also an option called limited, so you could run stuff at night and it doesn't take your cube down at night either while you're doing your general updates to Stratum. So anyways, this kind of tells you just the options that were used. The replace option was used. These were there's the adjustment I made. I think the filters are listed here somewhere. There's the bucket mapping, and here's the filters. So you can see all of the details that were used to run that particular data copy. So it will allow you to see that stuff. So anyways, that's that. The other thing that I wanted to show was, actually I'm going to go into the daily demo here, and let's get back to the home page so I can show you kind of what I'm going through here. So a couple of things. Once we copy a plan, and if you remember, I had the Western region already done, so I should be able to see that I should be able to see data in the Western region, so that while that other copy is running in the background right now. So one of the things, kind of what's the end result of doing all this? So the point here was to create a set of data that I could then use for my sales plan. And so here's my sales plan, or a view that allows me to maintain my sales plan. And I thought what was interesting in here, and I can go ahead and if I look at the West, I'll have data in this sales plan. And you can see here, here's that marketing adjustment 3. If I update this to be East, unless it's already finished, that should be blank. Yeah, so it hasn't finished yet, but you'll see that Eastern in a couple minutes here. We'll have that data. So going back to the West, I just kind of wanted to show this. So the end result of this is a view that would allow me to obviously see that data, make adjustments to that data, and ultimately use this view maybe as we're moving through next year to go ahead and continue to adjust my plan. So a couple of things here that I just thought were interesting in this view, because the other option you would have, and I'll show this in a second, is ultimately to export all this data to Excel, right, and make adjustments in Excel and then import that back into Stratum. Which, by the way, right, sorry, thank you. I apologize for that. You all should be seeing my view now. My bad. But you can copy this to Excel and then import that back into Excel as well if you prefer to work on your sales plans via Excel. And the challenge with that, of course, is first of all, now you've got you're going to have this plan, by the way, goes down to the item level by customer. So if you were adjusting that in Excel and you wanted to adjust, I don't know, all in my case, the product brands, you would have to filter Excel and apply some kind of factor to all of the entries for a brand. It's a lot of data to mess around with. But again, there are a lot of people that prefer to work in Excel as well. So however you want to do that. But I'm obviously showing some stuff here in Stratum, and I'll mess around a bit here. And then once that's completed, once I've shown this, I'm actually going to show how you could do some of this in Excel as well. But a couple features in this particular view that I think are interesting. Now, you have to remember that I'm actually in the current year. We haven't made it to next year yet, and I know you never actually get to next year. But so I have next year up here because right now I'm prepping for next year. But I can take this same view when we roll over the year, change the filter to be current year, and then then I'll be seeing last year's sales. I'll be seeing this year's sales for any months that are closed, any open orders that we have. I'll see those. Those will start flowing in as well. So I'll see that stuff. You just have to remember right now the context of this view is I'm going to use this to both look at my plan and work on my plan now, but I'm also going to use it to work on my plan next year as well when I'm in next year, and next year becomes the current year. So a couple of things here that I think are interesting in this view. First of all, as you can tell, this is a view that uses time as a dimension. So as I go across here, I've got my based months up and going across the top, and I have everything showing. But here you'll see I have a column for last year's sales. So for those of you that, when you do this and you're filtered on a year and you want to see last year's sales, this is an interesting problem because this year filter, when you show just your sales number, it's going to show just this year's sales. But if I look at this particular measure a couple of things here. So I've said I want this measure to work at two different levels. I want it to work at the year level and at the month level. I'm not going to go through all the detail here. What I think is important is that it is possible for you to have views, time range views, that have both this year and last year's sales next to one another. So if ultimately you want to create a calculation between those things, you can do that. So the obvious one is, percentage of sales this year versus last year. And I know that's, some people have expressed that that's been a challenge for them. There's a discussion of this out in the forum. So if you go out in the Stratum forum, which you can get to off the homepage, and I don't know, search on last year or something like that, and you'll find some write-ups and some descriptions of the calculations and how you can do this stuff. So be aware you can do that kind of stuff, and I think it's important when we're looking at a plan that you're able to do that, because people want to see other information when they're maintaining a plan, so that they're able to go ahead and make changes to that plan with some kind of context. I just don't want to be out there willy-nilly changing the numbers and just thinking, oh, I need to do this, that, or the other thing. So, I think that's something that people want to do. One other thing, as I'm looking at this plan, that I find interesting when I'm working on a plan, so I'm in here, and let's just imagine that this is really what I want to do is go ahead and I'm moving through next year. So, next year becomes the current year. And as we move through the year, I don't want to adjust prior periods. I just want to make adjustments to future periods. And you can filter your months so that you only see periods in the future. And in fact, I have a view that will allow us to see that. And I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to go to my sales input. And some of you may have seen this in a demo. This is very similar to the view I was just showing you, but I'll go into the West, and here in this view, now remember in my demo, as I've said many times, it's currently September. So what you'll see here is this view automatically does a couple things for me. It only shows me the current year and remaining months in that year. So as I'm moving through the year and adjusting my plan, this automatically floats with me. And to do that, there's a filter here that basically says what you're looking at here. This is an access filter, and I know not everyone uses access filters on a regular basis, but they're pretty cool. You can do some good stuff with them. And this lets me filter on multiple things if I want. And in this particular case, I'm basically saying, hey, if the month name is next month, if it's or it contains the word out, because all my future months, say 2 months out, 3 months out, 4 months out, et cetera, only show me those months. And that allows me to show just the remaining months that are out there, and then I've got this filtered on only showing me stuff in the current year. So in my case, when it's September, it shows me October, November, December, so that I can work on just specific things here. And last, when I'm in a view like this, I do, if you imagine what's going on, so it's September, I want to see the current month sales as well, because as I'm making adjustments, I want to understand how sales have been doing. So I've actually added current month sales. And this, again, is pretty straightforward. This is just a tuple. That's kind of calculation if you haven't done them, but here you can see I basically have, I've said take the time dimension and just take the current year and current month, and I put a comma and I say for the measures actual sales. The way I've gotten that to display here, which is pretty handy, is I've said, hey, make this what's called a distinct measure. If you were to look at the definition of this, I actually come in and call it a distinct measure, which is what these little stars mean. If I looked at current month sales and look at the properties for that, yeah, I'm zoomed in here. I'm going to have to. So here, down here, you can see I've actually called this a distinct calculated measure. And what that means is place this thing either at the beginning or the end of my list of measures and ignore the filtering that's going on in the column where, in my case, measures are being displayed in columns, so ignore the column filters. So that's another cool function that I see not a lot of people using in Stratum that gives you some more options in how things are created. So that's just a little bit about the view and the kind of view you might want to use when you are going ahead and trying to work on your planning data. I wanted to switch over to my Excel and just show you that this is actually finished. I'm going to go into here. I'm just going to drop that in here. But if I go into data copy, you can see I've got a bunch, my data copy folder. These are emails that I've received. I just received the Eastern region has completed. So now I've got data that was copied in here. So that, I don't know, that took 5-10 minutes to be able to do that. But anyways, now I can go back into my view in Stratum that we were looking at. I have this view out here that we've been using. And now I should be able to go into the region and select East. And what we'll see is that you can go ahead and now I've got stuff here. This was the sales that were copied. I included this so we could see this year's sales. And you can see this was incremented by X amount, which is, I'm sure, the multiple of 1.5% or 1.5%. And if I scroll down, remember I copied that. As I get out here, I don't have anything in September through November and December because I was going to copy the forecast in for those months that haven't happened. I'm not going to force you guys to sit through that, but that is one of the things you can do. So one of the last things I wanted to do is just show a couple of things that I think are kind of cool here. So now if I have this thing, I'm going to go to the West just because I have all my data for the West. I've done the copies. But if you remember, one of the things is I wanted to increase dewdrop just in general across the board. So if I wanted to do that in Stratum I can do that in Stratum Planning. I'm actually going to drill up to the year. So here's the total year by brand. These are brands down the side. I can go across the dewdrop and I can say, you know what, we're going to do 60,000 on this. I just want to increase this to 60,000. I can go ahead and do that. And when I do that, this is just using Stratum Planning. But the cool part is I'm going to write this back, and this is going to update the database and it's going to do the roll-ups and push-downs. And the reason I'm showing this is one of the distinct differences between planning and using Excel is I can very easily do that. So that just did a write back. It automatically distributed that 60,000 back across the months proportionally based on how the months were distributed, as well as it pushed it down to the dewdrop product. So if I drill down to the product level, dewdrop is just made up of a couple of products. And actually, I'm going to drill back up, you'll see here's that 60 grand that I just distributed. So proportionally pro rata distributed that across everything I have there. So that's one of the things when you're making adjustments to a plan in Stratum, you can make it, it'll make pro rata adjustments not only across the dimensions that make up, in this case, region, brand, product, and customer sold to, it also makes up, it'll do it across month. So that's something that you can do. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show, which I think is interesting here, when I did that data copy, the other thing that came in, if you're using attribute-based or virtual dimensions, so now you'll have additional data here in Stratum. So one of the things that I have a virtual dimension that's linked to my customer sold to, and it's actually the primary salesperson. So if I scroll down here and pick off the primary salesperson and say, okay, this data actually also exists by primary salesperson. So I can come down and drill down and see this by primary salesperson. Now that happened automatically. You didn't have to do anything because that's set up. I have a virtual dimension of primary salesperson off customer sold to. I don't have to worry about copying data to that dimension or anything like that. It will automatically populate those for you when you do stuff. So anyways, that's just an interesting feature as well. So the last thing that I wanted to show was now we've got our plan. The other thing I could do is I could actually take all this data out to Excel. And to do that, amazingly enough, I've got a view set up. Now, a couple things about creating this view. If you remember, I said that I have my plan at region, brand, sold to, and product. So I've included those dimensions in my view. I've also included for columns, I've included the year and the month. So this is next year, 2018, and I've got my 12 months going across the top. So I want to do that. So my export to Excel has 12 individual columns for me for each month. And then before I export, I need to drill down to get all the detail. Now, this could be drilling down into thousands, if not tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of records, and you want this to go pretty quick so you can get this data out to Excel easily. So a couple things about that. When I create this view, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my edit display options, and I'm going to maximize the performance of this view by turning off locking rows and columns. I'm going to use paging. I am going to not show totals. So that's an important thing as well. So, and then the last thing is, if you have the broadcast server, you can select Excel data here, and this data export is multitudes faster than if you use an Excel report export, which include the report export includes all the formatting and stuff that we do there. So I'm just drilling down here now. You'll see I'm just going to drill down because I'm going to export to Excel. I need to make sure I have the view completely expanded so all this data will go to Excel. And now I'm just going to click the Export to Excel button. And when I use that Export Excel Data feature, it does a couple of things for me. It's going to go ahead and automatically repeat the data in every row, so I don't have to fill that in. Stratum doesn't have to do that. It does that automatically on the export. So, when I look at these things, I have that. If you remember in my example, one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to increase the dewdrop product brand by X% or bring that up to another level. So one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on filtering for these things. The other thing, when you do this export, the headers look a little wonky here because of the style export I used, but this is easily fixed. I'm just going to go like this and add these here, right? So that Excel does that for me. So now I've got January through there. So now I've got all of my data in Excel. The last thing I wanted to do was increase this. So one of the challenges here, of course, I could create a pivot and I can then move up and down. I can't maintain the data in a pivot. I have to come back to the data sheet, create a pivot. I'm sure those of you that are great with Excel and probably way better at it than me or know all this or are more comfortable with this. But here I can select. I'll select dewdrop. So here I can say, okay, this will give me just the dewdrop records. At that point I can select all this stuff and I can increase all of these relatively easy in Excel. It's not great. This is the way I know to do this. Let's just say I wanted to increase. Let's say I want to increase all this by. I should have done this first. I don't know. I'm going to go up another 2 points here. So I'm going to multiply this times 1.02. I can do that, and now I'm going to go ahead and select all this data. So this is only my dewdrop stuff, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I blew that because I wanted to copy this. I'm going to copy this one last time. As you guys watch me struggle in Excel. This is why I promote Stratum planning. But anyways, I'm going to do that, and now I'm just going to paste this here. I'm going to do a paste special. If I go down to paste special, I can now say paste just the values, and I'm going to multiply, and I'm going to say OK, and that will increase all of those by that amount. And of course, I can also format all these things. I can add a comma, and I can get rid of some of the things here. So anyways, there you go. So I've done both things, both in planning and in data copy. I'm sorry, I copied the data over, and then I made adjustments both in planning and in Excel and showed you just kind of how you can do those kinds of things. So that ends my discussion of data copy today.